Welcome. My name is Jordan Schenker. I'm the CEO here at the PJCC, and I'm 7 months in, and I'm going to say new for a year. So I'm the new CEO here at the JCC. Delighted to be here and delighted to see you here in person this evening. We've had so many rare opportunities over the last couple of years to actually get together in person. It's nice to see people face to face, and pleased to have an opportunity to do so. We are honored to host the 12th annual Roundtable this evening. A number of thank yous to go around. First to my colleague Adam, who's sitting behind me, who is hosting us in his building tonight. And to our congregational partners and the clergy who represent them, who at a particularly kind of busy time of the calendar year, made some time to be a part of this program, and we really appreciate not just their presence, but the spirit of collegiality and cooperation that exists in our community. Having worked in the JCC world for over 30 years in 6 communities and consulted with dozens of others, I can tell you that spirit of collaboration and cooperation does not exist everywhere. We are fortunate in this community to have that kind of spirit of cooperation here, and this panel sitting behind me tonight certainly represents the best of that for us, and we're proud to be a part of that process. To a number of our staff people, our marketing team, and our facilities team who helped get this night ready, to Kim Gordon. How many of you saw the art exhibit this evening? It's a beautiful exhibit, really a dramatic exhibit, and we appreciate you holding it over an extra day before you pack it up and it sends it on its way to San Francisco. To the Koret and Taube Foundation, who are our funding partners for initiatives related to Jewish Peoplehood. And a public service announcement, a thank you to all of you for keeping your masks on this evening, not only to help protect each other, but to help protect the clergy behind us who have some pretty important things to be doing in the coming weeks. The theme for our program this evening of healing is particularly relevant, not just because of the way the Jewish calendar falls, but we're all in need of some healing this year. With all the different things that we've experienced, in our panel this night, we'll speak to it. And my final thank you is to our new Chief Jewish Experience Officer, Rabbi Laurie Matzkin, who is providing leadership. Who is providing leadership for Jewish life at the JCC and leadership for our event this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I do just want to point out 2 more collaborations that are coming down the pipeline. So the JCC, along with Peninsula, Sinai, and Temple Beth are doing a really special Tashlich first Shabbat of the new year together. We think it's the first joint Shabbat service that represents Reform and Conservative liturgy in one service. Rabbi Lisa will be on guitar, I'll be on flute, Cantor Doron will be on drums, we'll be in the garden. It should be really exciting. The boating piece is sold out, but come celebrate Shabbat with us and kick off the year with collaboration. And also just want to appreciate my colleague Kimberly, who has a beautiful, exciting concert this Sunday as well, the 18th, my anniversary. I'll actually be at the Yom HaShoah planning meeting, but so you should come to the garden and have the San Francisco Yiddish combo, and it's just going to be really fun and a great blend of old and new and lots of traditions. So you see next to me the piece that inspired our theme this evening. This gallery, this exhibit by Archie Rand was already up when I started here on July 6th. And this piece I just found so beautiful. The museum curator who wrote about it talked about the orange felt background that is like a protective blanket. It talked about the mental calm that can lead to physical healing if we allow ourselves to center and maybe take deep breaths. There are some shells, some little shells that evoke the reparative, the restorative quality of a seaside day and the world in harmony. And there's a butterfly shape, some butterflies, that might represent a pilgrimage or angel's wings, maybe the soul's journey from a cocoon of illness into renewed life. So just with a nod of your head, does something from that write-up resonate with you for your own experience of healing? Have you ever had that experience of renewal coming out of the cocoon, maybe of isolation, and then re-entering the world? Or really that sense of restorative transformation coming out of an illness or a mental state that was just really difficult or challenging, that you pushed through and really saw the world in a new way? Yeah. So those are some of the frameworks that I wanted to bring as we get started. So I'm going to open with some reflections from our panel. We're going to ask all of you to comment from the heart and a little from the mind. What does healing mean to you? Have there been moments in your life when you have personally prayed for healing? Or have there been moments or experiences when others have prayed for you that were important to you? So we're gonna go down the row and everyone is going to get to share. And then after that, we'll have probably about 3 panelists answer each question as we go forward. Please just keep a pen out if you have any notes or words or questions or comments that come to you, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So,
You want to introduce everybody?
I will introduce everybody. That's
I
fine.
wondered if you could get each person on the panel to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so thank you for the feedback, and we're gonna make sure that everybody gets to introduce as we go down the line. But I'll just say Adam Eilath is head of school here at Wornick Jewish Day School. Rabbi Ilana Goldhaber-Gordon is a rabbi at Congregation Beth Jacob in Redwood City. Rabbi Lisa Kingston is the senior rabbi at Peninsula Temple Bethel. Rabbi Ben Feeder is the senior rabbi at Peninsula Temple Sholom, and Rabbi Melissa Crespi is the long-awaited interim rabbi at Peninsula Sinai Congregation. That is our esteemed panel. So, back to healing. Adam, want to kick it up?
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi Laurie. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the rebranding of Rabbi's Roundtable and allowing me to join this esteemed group of clergy tonight. And welcome to Wornick Jewish Day School, everyone. We're really grateful to work with the PJCC and all of the synagogues to host this event in our building, where so much amazing Jewish learning happens every single day, and it's a joy to welcome our community into the building as well to learn with us. So to the answer of what does healing mean to me, I want to offer today that to heal is to recognize your power and agency in the world. It's when individuals and communities recognize that when the world seems tragic and senseless, we have the capacity to make a difference. As years go on, I really believe that human beings realize the irrefutable truth that as much as the world has moments of joy and blessings, that the world is also filled with tragedy, suffering, and unfairness. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. And I believe that the clergy here who are with me know this better than anyone. And they know the experience of supporting people who experience sudden tragedy. Rabbi Soloveitchik, one of the founders of the non-Orthodox movement in America, wrote in Kol Dodi Lefek, which means the voice of my beloved knocks. He writes that the second dimension of man's existence, destiny, is the question, in the second dimension of man's existence, destiny, the question of suffering takes on new form. What is the existence of destiny? It is an active existence, when man confronts the environment into which he has been cast, with an understanding of his uniqueness, value, freedom, and capacity, without compromising his integrity and independence in his struggle with the outside world. The eye of destiny is against your will, you are born, and against your will you shall die. But by your free will do you live. A man is born as an object and dies as an object. But it is with this capability to live as a subject, as a creator and innovator. And he continues and says, according to Judaism, man's mission in the world is to turn fate into destiny, from an existence that is passive and influenced into an existence that is active and influential. Soloveitchik reads in the very, very first commandment in the Torah, in Genesis, to be fruitful and multiply. He reads this as, conquer your environment and subjugate it. If you do not rule over it, it will enslave you. The month of Elul that we're currently in, the high holidays, are a time of introspection where we are indeed seeking healing. We're seeking healing from our own sins, from the sickness of our world, from the sickness of our families, from our own sicknesses. And I want to offer that we're not seeking to heal and imagine a world where pain and sin and tragedy just don't exist and won't befall us again. I think that true healing is to be able to proclaim our dominion in this world, to demonstrate that we're able to respond to difficult times with hope, wisdom, prayer, and action. Whenever a tragedy befalls our community at Wornick, or we're exposed to a tragedy both here in America or in Israel, we always tell our students at Wornick that they can do something about it. That's really important developmentally, especially for young kids. We don't want to persuade them that doing something about it means they can just make bad things go away. But we do think that they can make a difference. They can make cards, they can raise money, and of course they can pray. I'll just end my opening by saying that I've learned during my time as an educator that kids are always watching us, children are always watching us. And when we pray, we model for them how to pray by praying ourselves. When we go to synagogue on the high holidays, we can make explicit that what we're doing by praying is taking control over our world, finding agency, that we're doing something about really tough times. And that's healing for me.
Yasher Koach, Adam. That's beautiful. I wanted to offer some more personal reflections. One of the great blessings of being a rabbi is being able to be with people who are a step ahead of me in life, and learning from the example of how they encounter the hardships that befall them. I'm aware as I go through life of this little fear inside. Will I be able to face the challenges as they come? And I learn things from each person who faces them. For me, the first awareness of what healing meant came long before I was thinking about being a rabbi. I started out in my youth as a scientist, and I changed career mid-direction. So, age 28, I was nearing the end of my PhD in biochemistry, right on track. I planned out my first child exactly when he was going to be born, and knew exactly where I was going, what I was doing, and my first pregnancy ended in miscarriage. Not a tragedy. Good percentage of pregnancies end in miscarriage, but wow, it was a shock to me. 28 years old, I had no idea I was not in control of my body or my life. And over the years, there's been a deepening awareness that actually we're not in control. And that a good part of healing is accepting that loss of control and being able to be whole with it. I want to share with you something I learned from a congregant just this week. She's going through aging, and she said to me that the changes in her life are requiring her to reshape her identity, and how hard that is. And that was such a deep learning for me, that healing requires us to let go of what was and to accept what is, and be able to shape a new identity with the blessings that we have, whatever they are in this moment. Thank you.
So I was thinking about healing as being seen. And just this past Sunday, we had about 50 teens at our temple because they are being trained to be our madrakim, our roshim, the teens that lead our elementary school students in our education programs. And one of the things that we included for their training was where to get ice and where to get Band-Aids. And one of them said, "Are we gonna need to get a lot of ice and Band-Aids?" And I said, yes, you will need to get ice and Band-Aids every single Sunday that kids are here. Because I believe that even if it's just a scratch or a bump on the playground, that having that ice pack or having that Band-Aid for a young kid is a way of them being seen. They're being seen for their pain, they're being seen for an experience that they went through. And I believe that it starts with little Band-Aids and ice packs when we're young, but as we get older, we want people to continue to see us, and we want to be seen as full people, and that's why in healing we use the word shlema or whole. That our bodies and our souls, and Jewish tradition teaches, and we say this in our prayer, refuah ha-nefesh, healing of our soul, and refuah ha-guf, healing of our body. And that these two things are connected. So when we're in physical pain, we also experience existential suffering. And we can't be cured physically without also being able to somehow get rid of or release the lack of control, release the suffering, release the trauma, release the fear that comes around, that comes with illness. But mostly, we just are human, and we want people to see what we hold, both when it's hard, when it's an illness or something that we're struggling with, but also when we're not sick. We want people to see those non-sick identities too. We want them to be known for our strength and our courage and our passions. So how do we continue to exist as this whole self, where we're known both for what's whole about us, what we're proud of, and the parts of us that we hold and we struggle with. So healing is trying to find that balance somewhere in between, and being able to show up and be seen for all that we are.
Hey, Rev Tov. Hi, everybody. I want to start, thank you, Jen. I want to start just by taking note. It's really special what we're doing, and we have not done this for 3 years. That's a really long time for a region that has really made the value of working together communally for the blessings of everybody in the extended community to heart. For us not to be able to be together for 3 years and then to come back tonight, thank you so much. Rabbi Matzkin, for bringing us all together. Jordan, thank you so much for your impetus in bringing us all together. So, would you join me in a Shehechianu? Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has created us, sustained us, and brings us to this very special moment. Amen. So I've learned so much just by hearing your 3 perspectives. And I think what you're hearing is that for each one of us, healing means something slightly different. And I imagine for all of us, this is where we are today, September 13th, 2022, and we might have said something very different 6 months ago, or 12 months ago, or 18 months ago, and we might still say something very different 6 or 12 months from now. For me, right now, healing comes from recognizing our own fragility and really leaning in, admitting, and then looking to others for help. And that means to the people who are significant in our life. It means looking to help from God, whether one with a clear faith or not believes in God, but even just supposing there is a God, turning to God for help. And I think our American culture, in so many ways, tries to wean us of our vulnerability. And we are trained, I think, by society to think that we can do this. I mean, what's the most common thing you hear? Oh yeah, you got this. Well, no, I don't got everything, and there are things that are totally beyond our capacity to get. There are some major obstacles, threatening obstacles. No, I don't got it necessarily. So I think that's one thing, admitting fragility. And so I wanted to share an excerpt from the beginning of Psalm 42, because I think if we can open ourselves during the high holiday season to really being vulnerable and recognizing our fragility, I think the liturgy might be immensely more accessible because we won't be defensive. So here's the translation of the great biblical scholar, Robert Alter. As a deer yearns for streams of water, so I yearn for you, O God. My whole being thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and see the presence of God? My tears became my bread day and night, as they said to me all day long, where is your God? These do I recall and pour out my heart. When I would step in the procession, when I would march to the house of God with the sound, the glad sound of the song of the celebrant throng, how bent my being, how you moan for me, hoping God, for yet will I acclaim God, for God's rescuing presence. So what would the experience of healing be like? What would the High Holy Day experience be like for us if we could lean in to a bit of biblical poetry like that? And really the whole entire High Holy Day prayer book is full of different kinds of poems and metaphors and symbolism for our capacity to be healed. When we sing return, return again, Chadesh Yamenu, that whole premise is based on our ability to heal, to be something that is more whole in the future, our capacity to change for the better. I think there's something inherently positive and hopeful about the whole way our tradition frames the High Holy Days, and for me it's very uplifting. And there's something that's attributed to Abraham Joshua Heschel, which he said in his very last public address before he died in 1972. And this is 1972, remember, and he was asked, you have a message for the young people of the United States. And he said, let them remember that there is meaning beyond absurdity. Let them be sure that every deed counts, that every word has power, that we all can do our share to redeem the world in spite of all the absurdities and all the frustrations and all the disappointments. And above all, let them remember to build a life as if it were a work of art. We've been slogging through the muck for 3 long years. And now it's time, still in the midst of COVID, but in a different era of COVID, now it's time to really dedicate our energy to building our own works of art.
So I didn't realize I was so long awaited and that it was so well known in the community. But I'm Melissa Crespi, and I think my definition of what healing means comes from how I've searched for healing. So my definition, and I do think also that having spent 7+ years as a hospital chaplain also colors the way I think about healing. On an emotional level, I feel like not feeling pain or as much pain about a loss or a painful incident as you felt initially, or not feeling pain at all. I'm not sure the second can happen, but let's hope that it can. And when Laurie asked us to think about a time that we've prayed for healing, that's definitely been true for me. For an 8-year period from, this is before you guys were born, 1995 to 2003, I lost my father, and then my mother, and then my youngest brother. My dad was 62, which I now realize is very young, and my mom was 66, and my brother was 38. And I lost people who were very close to me, if not my best friends, then close to my best friends, and my best fans. I can remember when My husband Larry and I were driving up to meet with a birth mother because that was another thing that we had to heal from. We couldn't have children naturally. My brother Jonathan, may he rest in peace, said, Melissa, it's not right that you have to go through this, that you have to go meet with this birth mother. But just think, you might get a baby from her. And so that's the kind of person he was, and all the more so, my parents who, though not perfect, I did grow up thinking they were perfect, were just marvelous human beings and extremely loving parents. So, I still pray to be healed from their loss. And I have prayed for strength and will continue to pray for strength. But that's, I guess, where I get my definition of what healing is.
Wow, thank you everybody. What a beautiful, powerful start. So the text sheet is mostly here for reference, not for official study, but I want to just lift up the first text because it's the text of our artwork. Rabbi Peter talked about works of art, and he named it, here we are with the work of art officially. So, Rifa'enu Adonai v'nerafeh, heal us, Holy One, and we will be healed. So I'd like to ask some of you to explain your personal theology around prayer and healing. Do you believe in healing prayers? For example, what do you think the Mishaberach does? Right, so some examples, a different range might include this idea that Rabbi Ann Brenner writes in the Jewish Pastoral Care Handbook, which I thought was well articulated. If our ancestors were worthy of blessing, perhaps we are too. And the prayer merges the one who's suffering with the Jewish past and the present of those who are currently ill. That might be one idea of what the Mishaberach does. Perhaps prayer is an energetic alignment of intention with all of those praying together, right? Perhaps if you're a synagogue goer, not everybody is, but just knowing that that Torah is out Saturday morning around the world and we are all invoking the ancestors and thinking of those who need healing in our communities, the power of that alignment. Perhaps it's a time to just stop and get beyond ourselves and move beyond our needs and ego, and how coiffed we are on any given day, but think beyond ourselves. Or maybe it's magical thinking. But maybe it's magical thinking that gives someone the koach, the strength, to keep fighting for their health. The idea of knowing you are being prayed for, right? Knowing that people are rallying for you. So those might be 4 possible frameworks, and I think we're all curious to hear, again, what do you believe about the power of healing prayers? So let's maybe choose 3 folks. Ilana, do you want to start? Sure.
So I never claim to have a theology, only because I like lots of different theologies. But I want to offer 2 very different ways of thinking that complement what you shared, the 4 that you shared. So one comes from scientific studies. Lots of people have tried to study the effects of prayer, and some of them show positive healing effects, and some show negative healing effects. If there are any medical practitioners in the room, you probably know about meta-analyses. When you pull them all together, there's 0 effect. And I'm not speaking here as a scientist, so I can't swear on the statistics, but I think when you look deeper at these studies, you'll see that there are different forms of prayer. Some of the prayer is exactly what you talked about a moment ago, magical thinking. the feeling that you're not alone is incredibly, incredibly healing and gives us strength. And some of the prayers actually can have the opposite effect. The feeling that in some way you have caused this, you deserve this, this is a punishment, or no point in fighting because it's all in God's hands. Any of those types of prayers actually can have quite the opposite effect, and would explain. So that's my scientific brain thinking about. But then I also wanted to share with you, I've already mentioned that I had at one stage of life been a scientist. I also come from an Orthodox background, and I wanted to share with you the story of a friend who went to college with me, who was deeply involved in Orthodox Judaism as I was, and also a very serious scientist. Studied physics and did a PhD in physics, and has continued to be a quite accomplished physicist. And he stayed with it. I left both. He married a woman who, to know her was to love her, who died very young in their marriage. And it's remarkable to me, thinking back on my own life, when I was Orthodox and Jewish, Orthodox and a scientist, still Jewish, Orthodox and a scientist, how easy it was for me to believe that prayer actually had an effect beyond me. That it wasn't just the psychological impact that I just described in the scientific studies, but that actually my prayers were having an effect beyond me. And how when I left Orthodoxy, how hard it was to hold on to that feeling. And my friend, when his wife died, published an incredible essay called Quantum, Providence, and Rational Prayer, in which he combined scholarship in Jewish thinkers, halachic thinkers, deep scholarship, and serious physics analysis about quantum mechanics and how it could be possible for it to allow prayer to happen. And he concludes saying, traditional theology argues that God watches more closely over those who follow in his path. Einei Hashem el tzadikim, the eyes of Adonai are upon the righteous. Quantum theology argues that by watching more closely, God can choose the exact moment to make intentional and hopefully favorable measurements. Quantum mechanics provides the spiritual rationalist the rational ability to believe that God can answer prayers and the spiritual motivation to pursue closeness with God. And he published this after his wife had died. And who am I to say that prayer only has its impact internal to me?
I can't tell you why there have been times when looking at a painting by Cézanne or Van Gogh or Manet or Monet has been really restorative to my soul, but it just has been. I can't tell you why Crystal Blue Persuasion by Tommy James and the Shondells I find really beautiful and inspiring, but I do. And I think the magic in a lot of Judaism is in the fact that it just feels good. And there doesn't have to be a rational or deeply spiritual reason why it does. To me, the healing prayer just feels good. And I don't believe in the magical aspect of, or the magical notion of prayer in particular. But I also think, who am I to know or think I know how God works and how prayer works and how healing works? It's beyond me. But I know that when I hear the prayer for healing, especially when it's sung, and there are so many different beautiful melodies for it, it touches my heart. And when I hear other voices singing with the cantor, it feels communal and beautiful, and it just makes me feel like something's happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear, but it's good. It's good. It's really good. And to me, that's the beauty in a lot of Jewish rituals. They just feel good.
So I was also thinking about this Misha Barak prayer and prayers for healing in general as expressions of our hope and expressions of our whatever emotions we need to release. And I didn't share the opening reflection, but that time that I was thinking that came to mind as a time praying for healing was I was hospitalized in early 2020 with high blood pressure that was affecting my kidneys. And when I was in that hospital bed, I was crying and I was yelling and I was angry and I was desperate. And all of those emotions were prayer. And I wasn't thinking about the Misha Berach or what's in our morning liturgy. I was just what I needed to express, what I needed to get out of myself and put into the universe, because I couldn't do anything else. I had no other power than just to feel everything that was coming through the experience of being helpless and being out of control and being sick. So I think of just prayer, and particularly prayer for healing, as how do you articulate whatever it is that you need to feel, and how do you bring it somewhere where it might be useful rather than just keep it inside or express it in ways that aren't useful, like anger or, you know, abuse or those sorts of ways. So there's that, and then there's the praying on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, but mostly Friday nights at our congregation's practice, where we read those names and we rise and we have moments of praying with each other, and like you were saying, we have these beautiful melodies that move many of us to tears. And what is that about? So I think that it's both that time where you can express what it is you need to express. Hopefully you're doing it at a time that's not in crisis, but when you just making sure that you take those moments to express yourself. But going back to that theology that I presented earlier, and it's probably not a complete theology of being seen, right, is that reminder that while we're there praying for healing, there are others who are actually in the bed, in the place where they can't get out of it, where they are screaming and crying and yelling and angry. So a reminder that as a community, we have to see those people, we have to encounter those people, we have to make sure that we all belong, and we have to remember to care for those people. So that's sort of the theology that I bring to the Mishabera.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how moving it was to hear everyone share. And if you'll permit me, just two small things before I share. First of all, the psalm that Dan shared. So my wife on Sunday was helping her grandfather move out of his house. He's lived to a beautiful age of 98 and needs to move. He's from Iran originally, and one thing that I think happens in other cultures that we don't do as much here is memorizing poetry. One of the things my wife always does is she asks him to record poetry on her phone, and so I got a bunch of text messages with audio files, and one of them was actually the song that you read, Dan, in Farsi. So I thought it was really interesting that he's really clearly realizing that he's at a point in his life that I think those words just captured how he's feeling, the thirsting for a living God. The second thing, I didn't realize that you were close with her, and two of her, maybe we've made this connection before, two of her daughters were dear students of mine. And it's just beautiful to hear. So I mentioned that like agency, taking control of our environment is the way that we heal. And I think that Rabbi Laurie asked us to think of concrete ways that the Jewish tradition offers. And I just wanted to offer two that I think are beautiful. In the Babylonian Talmud, the Tractate of Nedarim, there are a number of pages that deal with the laws of visiting the sick. And it's clear in the Talmud 2,000 years ago that the rabbis believed that human beings had the power to heal. They literally said at one point in this sugya, in this topic, that every single person who visits a sick person takes away 1/60th of their pain. They really saw it as healing. There's a section that I think is talking about more than just recovering from a common cold. And near the end of the sugya, the topic, we're told that Rabbi Alexandri said in the name of Rabbi Chia Bar Abba that the sick person recovers from their illness only when they're forgiven from all of their sins. That's one thing. So it's a little unclear. Is this when God forgives them for their sins? Is this when they feel resolution? Is this when, again, thinking about Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, the transactional forgiveness happens? You go up to someone you've hurt and you've harmed and you say, I seek your forgiveness, and they give it to you. And the second is really interesting. It's something I want to talk about really briefly is Rav Hamnuna says he returns to the days of his youth. I think it's beautiful to think of returning to your days of your youth as a way of healing. There's so many things that young people do that old people feel uncomfortable doing. Being silly, goofing off, dancing, kind of letting yourself really go. And I think that it's amazing that thousands of years ago our rabbis acknowledged that being young is a way of healing. In the Zohar, one of the most beautiful stories is that when a child is born, the Zohar, which is the most important text in the Kabbalistic tradition, it says that when a child is born, the entire village of elders gather around the child and wait for their hands to open for the first time. Because when their hands open, all of the secrets and all the truths of the world are revealed. And I think that that sounds really like, perhaps like, well, how do we get, how do we lose all of our, sensitivities and really return to being a baby? But I think that there actually is agency there. Observing kids, being around young kids, it's something we get to do, we have the pleasure of doing every single day at school. Being an intergenerational community, having opportunities for younger people to be with, older members of our community. Being together as a family and observing youth, allowing people to feel like they can be young, allowing people to feel like they can lose their inhibitions and be like a child again is a way of healing. And I think it's something that we can all do, and frankly, I think it's pretty fun.
So Adam got us started on some concrete examples, and I'm hoping that we can leave tonight, not that we're leaving yet, but that we can leave with some more concrete stories from our Torah, from our tradition, that inspire you when you think about examples of being granted healing. The two that came to my mind were the story of Moses praying for his sister Miriam's healing, which in some traditions we actually sing, El na rafana la, please God heal her, when she has leprosy, sort of this like scaly skin disease, which is a consequence for her not right speech. But still her brother prays for her healing in a very concrete way. And also I was thinking about the miracle of Hagar's eyes being opened, right? Hagar's eyes are opened when her son Ishmael, who is not the hero of Jewish tradition, but whose life we care about nonetheless, they have been sent out away from Abraham and Sarah. They're out in the desert, and in her motherly instinct, she cannot take the pain of imagining her son dehydrating and dying. So she turns away to sort of self-care in this tragic moment, and suddenly a miracle happens and her eyes are open, and she sees healing living waters and brings him to drink, and behold, Ishmael is okay and carries on and becomes another people. So two very different examples. One is sort of the realizing that the healing power is right here in front of us, and one is the articulation of the words that can bring healing. So, friends, what other text? We'll start with Rabbi Crespi. Can you give us to put on our Post-it notes and remember the Torah story?
I'm not sure if this one will fit on a Post-it note, but this is one of those passages in the Talmud that speaks to me about healing, and it's really more about how we help each other heal. So it's from the Babylonian Talmud, Masechet Brachot, and it's a series of stories. They generally have Rabbi Yochanan as the healer, but in this story, it's Rabbi Yochanan who is ill. Rabbi Yochanan once fell ill, and Rabbi Hanina went to visit him and said to him, "Are your sufferings welcome to you?" And Rabbi Yochanan replies, very honestly, "Neither they nor their reward." So I don't like these sufferings. They're painful to me, and it's almost like I don't care what the reward is supposed to be. I don't want to be suffering. So Rabbi Hanina says to him, "Give me your hand." He gave him his hand, and Rabbi Hanina raised Rabbi Yochanan. That is to say, he healed him. And I think this, and this "give me your hand" occurs in all the other stories. It's that personal touch. It's that feeling of another human being. I'm going to be able to raise you. I'm here for you. I'm here to comfort you. I'm here to pray for you. And there are a number of places that have their Bikor Cholim, they're visiting the sick, entitled, "Give me your hand." And then the Talmud asks, why could not Rabbi Yochanan, the healer, raise himself? And so the rabbis say, the prisoner cannot free himself from jail. And I think that's very true. That we may be the best rabbis we can be. We may be, and others among us who are personally very compassionate. But when it's you that's in the bed, and you may pray, I think the more powerful thing is to have someone else holding your hand or praying for you. And as Rabbi Lisa said, being acknowledged, calling out that you are there, is just very powerful. And that's the reason why I find this story very powerful.
So, I'd like to talk about the body more directly. The Asher Yatzar blessing, which is sometimes known as the bathroom prayer, but it's really the morning realizing that you have a body prayer. It talks about the body being created with wisdom, the chokhmah. And I actually was attuned to this sensitivity by another colleague of ours, Rabbi Michael Copeland, who is at Shar Zahav in San Francisco, and we were speaking about this prayer. And we have this issue that when the body has a problem, or maybe our collective body as society, we sort of have two choices, right? We might think of it as this problem is teaching us something we need to learn. It's making us aware of a habit or a pattern that we've been doing which is not healthy and has led us to this place. Or we might think of it as sort of a breakdown, something that went off plan, went off course. Right? Perhaps cancerous cells multiplying, or a peaceful protest turning violent, right? So I'm wondering if we can break this down a little bit and think about the idea of wisdom in the body, or wisdom collectively, and how we relate, to the situation that led us to need healing to begin with. Back to Melissa, go ahead.
When our body has an issue, as you said, our body is broken in some way. And sometimes I think we need to learn something about it, like if we're overeating and it's taxed our heart, or other parts of our body. And sometimes it just happens, like cancer cells. And I don't think that God causes us to have cancer cells. That may seem sacrilegious to some, but I don't think that God is, I don't think that God punishes that way. I believe that it's part of a natural process, and sometimes it's influenced by heredity, and sometimes it's influenced by the pollutants that our society puts into the air. But even though I don't think that God causes those kind of illnesses, I do think that God is with us if we choose to think about that in our illness. I think God walks with us. With regard to society's ills, when something goes wrong, I think it may point to something that we need to learn, like how to treat our fellow human beings much better. But I think it's more complicated than that, because we may differ. In fact, we do differ on what's wrong in our society and what is right. Maybe the people in this world or this corner of the world agree, and maybe they don't. But all of this, disease and societal problems, can be or are deeply painful, and there are often no easy solutions or quick fixes to them.
I'll add an assent to what you just said about how our hunch is that God works. And my hunch is not that God sends us afflictions. I just don't believe it. And again, who am I to say how God acts? I have a very small window, like every other human being, into how God works. But I do have a hunch that when we're walking through difficult times, either individually or as citizens of the world, and I think COVID, particularly spring and summer of 2020, was a really, really hard time for everybody, and hard if we were trying to keep our communities well and afloat, whether we were in the business world or whether we were running congregations and trying to keep our communities whole and healthy and intact for when we come out of COVID. But I heard something in the midst of my personal anguish, because every acute point of decision seems so weighty and so big and so confounding. And I heard a person speaking about how they reacted to their cancer diagnosis, the loss of their left arm. And this was a fundamentalist Christian speaking. And he was asked publicly by the media, so now that you have cancer and now that you're losing your left arm, where's your God now? And he said with incredible grace and a lot of wisdom, you know, I wake up and I have my wife and my parents and my doctors and caregivers. And I think God has given me important people to make these decisions with. And then, like a flash of light, it dawned on me, I'm not making these decisions alone. You've got a lot of really wonderful people that you work with and that you lead the congregation with that have a lot of wise perspectives. And to me, that was the window to let God in. Was it God acting directly? Well, it was God gracing me with people that I could make some good decisions with. And to me, that was the work of God.
too agree that I don't believe God sends us suffering. That would not make sense to me. Suffering happens. It's part of the way the world is designed, or the way the world is. I don't think there's any moral cause for suffering by any means. But I do believe that suffering provides an opportunity. Not that we ask for it, not that we want it, not that we deserve it, but when it comes on us, it does provide an opportunity for growth and learning. And I say this from a place of humility, because as I indicated earlier, I wonder when I see people going through things so much harder than I've ever gone through, how would I navigate it? But I speak from having witnessed people who have gone through tremendous suffering and have, through it, opened their soul to greater awareness of themselves and the people in their life, greater appreciation, greater gratitude, in some cases just greater awareness of the universe. They're really precious souls, those who can transform their suffering into learning. And my prayer for myself is, should I be in that place, that I should also succeed in doing so.
I'll say that after such beautiful reflections, I think I just want to add that I kind of hate this prayer. that this prayer of reminding us of God's perfect design has to, that we recite when we ourselves experience every imperfection. I mean, the prayer talks about, if one little valve opens and closes at the wrong time, we're done. And that we feel every single thing that's wrong with us, from an ache or a headache to a hangnail to again, God forbid, the cancerous cells multiplying, the miscarriages, the things that really go wrong with us. So in light of trans bodies and people who really see their body as not the perfect design for them, I just wonder if the prayer has become dangerous in light of what we really want to encourage, of just accepting our limitations, accepting our shortcomings, accepting the imperfections of our body, instead of trying to acknowledge the perfect design of God. And I know many of you are familiar. We sing at PTBE the Dan Nichols version, which in the English says, perfect the way I am and a little broken too. And just acknowledging that this prayer offers us a theology, but that how we might understand it is not what the literal text says.
I love that it irks us, right? I love that it's true. Like, how did these rabbis 2,000 years ago know that our headaches and our hangnails would still be so annoying 2,000 years later? So to me, I hear what you're saying, but I love that it pushes us to bring our physical sort of somatic awareness into a religious context, and to think of it as sort of a cosmic spiritual truth that we have these bodies, and there are days and moments where we wish we could fly away like the butterfly into the spiritual realm and just leave all the aches and pains and larger diagnoses behind. But we are embodied souls, and that I think is part of what Judaism's message is that our imperfections are what give us B'Tselem Elohim, that make us in the spirit and in the image of an imperfect God, right? So thank you, Rabbi Lisa, for mentioning brokenness. One of the PJCC Ikarim main essential principles is that of shleimut, which you mentioned before, wholeness, from the word shalom. Shalom, shlema, shleimut. Wholeness of body, mind, and spirit. But I'm reminded of the story of the broken tablets that Moshe smashed when he saw the people, when he came down from Mount Sinai partying with the golden calf. How frustrating would that be? He could not even handle the anger that came from his inner body and soul to see the betrayal of his people when he's just trying to be in this spiritual connection. And yet, the smashed tablets stay with us in the Holy Tabernacle and travel through the desert with the new tablets that we receive. This is sort of the Tisha B'Av and the Yom Kippur stories coming together. We always have these broken tablets with us in our heart and in our teaching, right? So I love this idea we're hitting on of honoring our brokenness and moving towards wholeness, just to bring some of the comments together. And I want to ask one more question for many of you, maybe not all, but most of you, before we go to our congregation of questioners here. So we talked about the high holidays, and many of the texts on the sheet talk about the book of life. We have this idea of Sefer HaChaim, right? Remember the book of life, write us in the book of life, inscribe us in the book of life. I'll just say some of the Hebrew to warm you up for the holidays. Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim, Zochreinu L'Chaim, right? Remember us to life, right? Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim over and over. The Sefer Chaim Bracha V'Shalom. Remind us that we're going to be written in the book of life. Help us get there. So given this backdrop of imperfect bodies, of imperfect societies, of coming out of 3 years of COVID, of all of the horrible and difficult diagnoses and physical conditions we have, the idea of chronic illness, palliative care, we aren't always praying for a perfect healing, going back to your grandfather-in-law. And so this idea of the book of life, what does it mean? What does it mean to genuinely pray to be in the book of life this high holidays, knowing with all the nuance that you presented, how can we, with sincerity, ask for something that feels authentic?
I'm still kind of thinking about Lisa's comment. I think try to say something on the fly here. I think that Dan Nichols' rendition is really brilliant, because I think that there's two narratives in Judaism. One narrative is that we choose life constantly, and I'll talk about that in a second. And we're trying to choose life as hard as it is to choose life. We're trying to take agency and ownership over our world. We're trying to take responsibility of a broken world. And the other is that the world is a little bit broken, as Lisa shared with us. And I think that's acknowledged in the liturgy. We read the Torah reading in Rosh Hashanah as the binding of Isaac. And I know that there's lots of different ways you can interpret why we read the binding of Isaac. It's a pretty intense story. And I also think it's very relatable. The world often feels like we are taking what we love most and every single day risking it and bringing it closer and closer to sacrifice. I certainly feel that anxiety and worry as a parent sometimes. I wanted to share a little bit about, in terms of what Rabbi Matzkin was asking us, in terms of some thoughts. So my family, as I may have mentioned, is partially from North Africa. And right before the blowing of the shofar, we read a poem which I love. It's called Et Sharei Ratzon. And it means it's a time of, I guess you could say it's a time of favor, the time of God's will to be done. And it's a long poem that describes the binding of Isaac. And you sort of read it in this meditative song, sort of this meditative trance, right in front of the Torah scrolls. And it's not like, every single morning in Shacharit, in the morning service, you're supposed to read the story of the binding of Isaac. But it's not just that, it's more drawn out. It's more painful. Sarah, the mother of Isaac, is asking God, how can you possibly leave the world without a moon? And it's very emotional and very painful to hear. And I think that's because the world is painful, and the world is really, really challenging. And the world is filled with misery. And we're asking God to join us in doing what I think the Jews have done quite well for thousands of years, which is to choose life. We've experienced some horrible things over thousands of years, and we've chosen to continue living. And even today in Israel, when there's an awful, awful attack, one of the most incredible things to me is how people intentionally try and go to bars the night after and go to restaurants and stay out, not as a way of trying to risk their lives, but as a way of affirming life in the most incredible way. I wanted to share that this song called Et Sharei Ratzon, which describes, it's a really long poem describing the binding of Isaac. My grandmother lived until her 40s and 50s in North Africa and Tunis. And she said that when a woman was laboring for a really long time, giving birth, all of the boys from the local school would gather outside of the room where the woman was laboring, and they would sing this song. They would sing this, they would chant the story of the binding of Isaac. And I think that, sorry, what did you say?
That's not what I would want.
That's not what you want to hear.
Makes you forget.
So I think that the reason I share that is because I think that one thing to do is just say, well, we're going to choose life. I think the other thing to do is affirm out loud with words that there's two narratives in the world, and that we acknowledge that the world is precarious, and that it feels like we have to bind our most precious child on the altar for God. At the same time, we're asking God to choose life. We're asking God to sign us in the book of life. I think not just saying, write us in the book of life, as Rabbi Matzkin just chanted for us, but also that the world is precarious. Saying those two things at once, holding both of those things at once as we approach Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are really important.
That's very peaceful. I didn't mean to dismiss
All
your
good. It's all good. I
tradition.
like that you just said that. That's great.
So we'll keep it a little bit brief.
I just want to follow up. Can you hear me? Yes. I want to follow up a little bit on what Adam said. And that is, praying for life. I mean, I think at its basic meaning is to be able to continue to live. But I also think that in this broken world, in our broken bodies, we want to continue to live the most meaningful life that we can live, given all that brokenness. So someone who is receiving palliative care, and it's not going to cure them, but we can pray that it's going to relieve some of their symptoms, and when we pray for, first of all, I think all of those prayers are very powerful. All right, and I also think that it helps if they're sung musically in a beautiful way. But we want to be able to continue, whatever our brokenness is, those parts of our life that are most meaningful. So that could be being with our family and friends, being able still to enjoy nature, reading. I'm pointing out some things I like. Studying Torah, being in shul, which I know is very important for many people. And that our life should continue to be meaningful, not only that we should have another year of life.
Last chance. So, if there are a few comments or questions, I'm going to come down, and we have a couple special surprises for our closing. At least I have some special surprises. So don't go anywhere. So does anyone want to participate? It doesn't have to be perfectly formed. Up and down. Give you a second. Anybody? All right. And tell us your name, your first name.
My name is Matzkin. My question is, there are a few things I have brought down to ask you guys.
A little closer.
Healing prayer for mentally ill people. I don't see that many of us to acknowledge that is a different, maybe type of prayer, maybe a different way to reach this audience.
Thank you.
And another thing is faith in Mishaberach. There is a Mishaberach, there is a prayer, but where is our faith following that Mishaberach? What is it we are responsible if we are sick to believe on the people and community and rabbis and even doctors that pray for us? Those are most important. And the last one, are we closest to God when we are ill? Are we there yet? Are we going to acknowledge there is a God now? Do we want to know who is He in order to have a better communication with Him during our sickness? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add a few questions while I'm here?
Well, on the mental health issue, I'm David, I'm a psychologist. And my question is, so I'm Claire, is that I pray that I heal from a pure place. Not for me, but the best I can do. It occurred to me, I was in a class once, it's a psychology convention, they asked, where's the mind? Everyone went, here, right? No. Scientifically proven, we can detect brain waves about this far out. So as we sit together, what do? We can meld our thoughts, and if our thoughts are about healing, perhaps we can help each other out. The book was like The Soul of Healing. Everyone thought it was about poetry. No, it was about the healer, what the healer needs to do. So my question is, so much as to say, I think when you want to help, you come from a pure place and wanting the best for that person.
Thank you so much. Is there one more comment? Question? Okay. Any responses? We've got some things to think about here.
Well, I want to thank you for mentioning that we haven't overtly referred to mental health in terms of the Mishaberach prayer. And I think all of us, when we frame the Mishaberach prayer in that moment in our communities, we explicitly speak of healing of body and healing of spirit. And I think one of the effects of COVID is that I think people in 2022 are speaking much more openly about mental health and mental health vulnerabilities. And I think also that I think younger generations speak about mental health much more openly than older generations. And that's a really, really good and healthy thing. And so I think it's now just a part of how we do everything at our synagogue. It's thinking about the mental health component. So where is faith in that? Gosh, I think at any time you pray, it's a leap of faith. And I think one of the things that the Jewish community in our Jewish prayers does well is to help us affirm the goodness of life and the goodness of the world that God created, even at times when we might be least inclined to affirm that. And I think that's what we're doing in the Mishaberach prayer, that's what we're doing in the Kaddish prayer. And I thank our tradition for the irony of that.
So there's a tradition in Elul to hear the shofar, usually in the mornings. There's a side tradition that's a little less known, that we can also hear the shofar in the evening. The shofar itself is an opportunity to listen and to hear. The blessing, as Rabbi Peter and I were just speaking about last week, is not to blow the shofar. It's not like the blessing to chant the Megillah. No. It's the receiver. It's lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the call of the shofar. Sometimes the shofar is thought of as a mother's cry. And we've heard a few different examples of mothers crying out tonight. Sometimes it's thought of as a chizuk, as a chance to strengthen ourselves as we go into battle. And sometimes it's just that pure, non-language-based sense of brokenness and connection that brings us back together. And so, in the spirit of healing and acknowledging the brokenness as our first step to shleimut and to wholeness and to re-entering the book of life in this way of finding meaning for however many days or good moments we have.